probably the big kicker, my water bladder in my bag broke. So I basically had this like bubbly full of like, I don't know, half dead jellyfish that I was trying to try and keep the water in. So I had to put my hiking poles in my bag. And so I was basically dehydrated, lonely, sunburnt, tired, pretty much every mental, physical, and emotional issue that you could have. It felt like it was happening to me on that day. But I guess I'm the person that can always tries to find a positive out of everything. And I struggled on that day, but as the days went on, as the weeks went on, I found that every day was easier because that is the lowest I've ever been. So I know that if I can do that, I can pretty much do anything. And as far as resilience goes, that is just such a huge, I don't know what the right word is, such a huge barrier to be able to break through, that you know what your limits are, you know what your capabilities are to be able to do something. So I know if I can get through all of those things, I can do anything. So,
and that was Josh West, and this is Shoulders of Atlas. I'm your host, Jeff Pagsanjan, and welcome to episode 5. In this episode, we catch up with long distance adventurer Josh West of Trekking West. Now, when I say long distance, I mean long distance. For example, in 2018, Josh solo hiked the 1,200 kilometre Heysen Trail, which begins in the Flinders Ranges in outback South Australia and concludes in Cape Jervis. This adventure took 59 days to complete over some rugged terrain which tested Josh both physically and mentally. He journaled that day 3 was the hardest day of his life, battling loneliness, dehydration and physical exhaustion. However, from the adversity of this day, he was able to complete the remainder of the trail, which created the appreciation for his inner strength to draw from throughout the rest of the journey. This trek was not just for personal enjoyment though. Josh identified that this trek could be much, much more. As a country kid, growing up between the townships of Tanunda and Bethany in regional South Australia, Josh recognised that mental health services are highly sought after in country SA, though not as abundant as it is in metro areas. So, the adventure tied into raising funds for the Black Dog Institute, which Josh identified as having great programs which promote mental health in regional parts of Australia. This long-distance adventure concluded with Josh raising over $12,000, which is a simply remarkable feat. Now, after 9 weeks of solo trekking, Josh was well and truly bitten by the long-distance adventure bug. The following year, Josh headed off for Europe and hiked the Camino de Santiago, a trail which spans over 825 kilometers. As we know, the pandemic had affected us all, and Josh was no exception to this. Due to various lockdowns and restrictions, his next adventure would not take place until this year. Josh traded hiking poles for a kayak paddle and set about travelling the length of Australia's longest river, the Murray River. Once again, Josh leveraged this adventure as a platform to raise funds and awareness for the Black Dog Institute, where he was a recipient of over $7,500 worth of donations. Now, because of this accomplishment, I've dubbed Josh as the Nedd Brockman on water. Throughout this chat, we touch on Josh's inspirations for tackling long-distance adventures and how he prioritizes and arranges his life's obligations to create meaning and purpose. After all, 60 days off to raise funds during a long-distance trek may be difficult to negotiate, especially in a 9-to-5 situation. So it was really eye-opening to touch on how Josh aligned his purpose in order to meet his lifestyle needs. Now, this was an absolute fun and inspiring chat to be a part of, so I hope you enjoy. Let's not keep you waiting longer. Enjoy this chat with Josh West, aka Trekking West.
that was it. It's been almost 2 years worth of build up. So the idea first came to me before the pandemic, and then the plan was to go during the pandemic, and then we couldn't leave the house, and then the year was to go, the idea was to go the next year, and then I couldn't leave the house, and then it was like, okay, I've just got to go, I've just got to make it work. Doesn't matter if it's La Nina season, doesn't matter if it's like Japanese encephalitis around, like you've just got to go, you've just got to do it. And then turned out that there was very few mozzies, and it was the only like 2 dry months of the whole year, so it couldn't have worked out much better.
Just that whole serendipity about it, in terms of you made a decision and away we go, and then everything just sort of fell into place.
It's actually quite incredible how often that happens. Maybe not to everyone, but to me, like, yeah,
Yeah.
the stories from the Heysen Trail and the Camino and everything, it just tends to work out. Yeah.
Yeah, there's yeah, like I said, the serendipity of it all, just with it panning out to be like, you could have probably sat there thinking of the worst case scenario in terms of, yeah, like it's the wrong time of year to do it, or something along the lines of weather related things that are out of your control. Yet in the end, you just made the decision and made it work. And boy, have you made it work! Like, which is fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's yeah. I mean, positivity breeds for me. Positivity breeds positive results. So if you're able to like stay in a positive frame of mind, then yeah, good things tend to follow. That may be the exact same for someone else, but because you're already in that positive mind frame, it's much easier to see the good things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I guess from using that as, like, I guess a bit of a soundbite, thanks very much for actually accepting the invite to come join the show and share your perspectives on health and all things that sort of surround mental health. I guess in the notes that I sent to you for the purpose of our catch up today is around purpose. And according to your Instagram bio, you're a ambassador for the Heysen Trail, Friends of the Heysen Trail. Now, how did that come about?
Yeah, well, so I through hiked the whole Heysen Trail back in 2018, back when the world was a very different place. In fact, we were just coming out of a massive dry spell. So I was really worried about the tanks being full, really worried about like the country I was going to run through, or walk through, I should say. And yeah, it was just like I remember it being a really tough time for regional like communities.
Mm.
So that was when I decided to raise money, well, on my community walk. And yeah, so Black Dog Institute was the organization that I was raising money for. So I set up this whole massive walk, which culminated in, yeah, I think it was about $12,000 worth of fundraising by the end of it. And yeah, so there was videos, there's blogs, there was vlogs, there was a bit of everything. There was a community hike in there as well. So I think it was about 30 odd people I walked from Greenock to Tanunda in the Barossa Valley with. And then, yeah, so it was just such a fantastic, wholesome experience. And then almost, I think it was about 9 months later, I was walking the Camino and the friends caught wind of all the things that I've been doing and said, like, we've got a whole lot of sort of, it's kind of like section hiking people that we like to go to in terms of content, but no one is doing it through hiking kind of a blog or community information. So they said, we would love for you to come on board as a brand ambassador. So I was absolutely thrilled, over the moon. I couldn't quite believe what began as a thought kind of 12 months earlier, it turned into an ambassadorship. So it's just, yeah, it's one of those really full circle moments from not really knowing heaps about the trail to knowing everything about the trail, and then being able to pass on my knowledge to others.
Yeah, that's so cool how that sort of eventuated in terms of what yeah, it sounded like you were initially planning it, and then all these sort of follow-on things, like 9 months. You were saying you were on the Camino, that they got in contact with you, and you became a brand ambassador for the trail. And yeah, it's amazing what has come out of the initial thought of raising funds and also supporting rural communities as well. So that was 2018, and you said it was an idea that was spawned about 12 months prior to that. So that's what, 5 years ago now. What was the thought process, and why did you choose the Heysen as the way or the vehicle for fundraising?
Yeah, well, the decision to walk the Heysen Trail was about 3 months or about 4 months before starting the trail, but the seed had been planted about 25 years before that. So I grew up on a little patch of road between Tanunda and Bethany in the Barossa Valley, and I would always cycle on my way to school. And there was this red arrow pointing off into the distant ranges, and I never knew what this red arrow kind of meant. Like, it was nothing toward the ranges, like it was pretty boring. And then after going to the Cedars in the I think the Adelaide Hills, to see Hans Heysen's work and learn more about his legacy and more about the trail. It kind of like the seed was sprouted then, and then after, how long, it must have been about 20, 25 years later, the idea to actually come back to South Australia. So I'm jumping back and forth here. I'm sorry about
That's
that.
fine.
But I had done a lap of Australia leading into the trail, house sitting and
because you called it that was
and,
your digital nomad. That's you wanted to step away from the 9 to 5 grind and get into the digital nomad space. And I think you said you spent over 200 days house sitting in 365 out of 365 for that year.
Yeah, it was such a great experience. And through that, I also discovered nature's a bit of a bit of a fat term, but like I actually was able to really engage a lot in Australia's beautiful, unique landscapes. So that was kind of the whole. So there was the seed planted of the Heysen Trail, the appreciation of nature, and knowing of the mental health benefits of being able to just do and explore and be and just immerse yourself in things that you want to do. I really found they all kind of combined and led to the Heysen Trail walk.
And so I guess the combination of like getting in touch with nature, doing the activity and understanding the mental health benefits of getting in touch with nature and doing activities like that. How did the Black Dog Institute sort of tie into or ties into what you were doing at that time?
Yeah, so I really wanted to raise money. That's something I really felt like I needed to do. And I felt at that time with all the droughts going on, it really needed to be sort of country focused, remote focused, and Black Dog Institute do a whole heap of really valuable remote work and remote research. So that's where they came into it, and they were fantastic. So they wanted they were able to give me a whole heap of support as I went along the way, and then some years later I raised money for them again early this year when I paddled the Murray.
Yeah, and so you said that you raised in your walk along the Heysen, you raised over 12 grand for the Black Dog Institute. Your Murray paddle, you also raised over 7,676, I think the number was, for that trail. So you've almost raised $20,000 for your two efforts there. It's almost just about the equivalent of kilometers that you would have covered in the sense of what you've done so far, hasn't it?
Quick maths, I like it. Yeah, and so a part of this has also been doing talks at different schools and different community groups. And I've actually got, I've got to check my calendar. I think it's next week. I've got a chat with Rotary, who evidently are going to chip in some money, some extra external money for the fundraising, which will get me over the $20,000 mark. So it is so fantastic to be able to sort of break that barrier, and something I really wanted to do, coming into these adventures.
Yeah, that's really cool how you grew up in a rural part of South Australia, being between Tanunda and I forgot the other name of the town that you were in.
Bethany,
Bethany.
Yeah.
And really focused, like drew your focus of raising funds for, and like your selection of the charity or the charity that that you selected was, you really identified that was in alignment with who you are as a person for contributing to rural mental health. And growing up in rural South Australia, how was like mental health? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, it didn't really look like anything back in the 90s. Like it really wasn't a discussed topic. It really wasn't really brought up at the dinner table. It was really something that wasn't spoken about. But I can see how far that's come. And I know that the research and the work done by Black Dog Institute and many other organizations is really making a difference. So it's really great to see it come such a long way, particularly from what I remember anyway. It wasn't really a a done thing or a known topic back in the 90s.
Yeah, that's from the people that I've interviewed so far, that seems to be a recurring theme, is that back in the day it wasn't really talked about. It was either you really had to put up with it and just suffer in silence, so to speak. Whereas now being able to have that conversations, and what I think what I think is fantastic about your fundraising efforts as well is that you've been able to strike up conversations with the people along the way. I think on one of your journals for the Murray paddle, you said that you were striking up conversations with people who were the holiday makers along the river, which is fantastic. Like, how did, for me, as someone who doesn't really approach people, like I'll put it out there as being someone who's maybe more introverted and maybe a bit shy when it comes to meeting new people. How did you broach that? Or for you, what is your approach when it comes to talking about mental health and striking up conversations with strangers, basically?
Mate, totally. I'm exactly the same. I'm so introverted. It's almost painful at times, but especially when you get out and you're all by yourself and you don't talk to people for days or weeks. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. You just want a human interaction conversation. So in terms of starting the chat, it really wasn't that difficult at all. But yeah, it's really, and I think this is probably going back to the previous point. Like, I don't know if I could have started these sorts of conversations 30 years ago. And I'm not sure people really would have wanted to hear it 30 years ago either. Like, wouldn't have been engaged in the topic. So it really wasn't that much of a challenge, I guess, to be able to broach these sort of conversations, because it naturally flows from, like, why are you paddling all this way? You know, there's a plane you can fly over. And they're like, oh, so raising money, et cetera, et cetera. So it was really such a beautiful, wholesome experience talking to holidaymakers, people fishing along the banks as well. Like, everyone's really curious and super supportive about an adventure like this.
Yeah, and it sounds like the fact that you were out there with a purpose, and that you weren't just doing it like someone had pointed out to you. You could fly over the top of it, and you do that within a space of an hour or two. But you actually hopping onto a kayak and raising funds that way, and using like I said, the purpose behind trying to raise awareness for mental health issues. Speaking of purpose, like, what does purpose mean to you?
That is a very good question. Yeah, it's something that for me, it comes down to priorities and what you really want to do and make, and how you want to help and how you want to support others. And so once you know your priorities, you can figure out your purpose and how to move from what you want to do. I found my purpose can change. Like, we were talking earlier about, after finishing a long-term adventure, like, my purpose was like, well, what do I do now? I'm back behind a computer screen and I'm not listening to birdsong every morning. I'm not seeing, I'm not waking up and seeing the sunrise every morning, which is something I really should do more of. But yeah, I think purpose can change, but being open to what your priorities are and how they come along and how they develop and how you change over time as well as a person, is something that it's not easy always to figure out what that is. But sorry, my phone's going sec. Is something that isn't always easy to find, but it's very good once you give yourself the mental space to be able to locate it.
Yeah, and speaking of, like, how it changes in terms of over time, let's take a step back. When you began the Heysen Trail, what was your purpose then, and where were you at? It's 4 years ago now, so where were you at back then?
Yeah, well, at that time, I just wanted to get out of the office, frankly. I really wanted to explore. I think I really wanted to discover my purpose more than anything. I didn't really know what it was, and really discovered that purpose through exploration. So really wanting to be able to help share knowledge and help educate people on whether it's mental health or long distance adventures or specific things like the Heysen Trail or the Murray River or the Camino de Santiago. I really felt that education was something I hadn't really done much of before. I think as a designer in my previous life, as a designer, I always felt like I was like, pardon the gory analogy, giving birth to these kind of businesses and brands, but then passing on the baby to someone else who then they were able to do something with. So it was kind of this weird, I don't know, I never really felt enriched by doing that, but seeing I've created the baby and was now able to be able to nurture it and help others through it, is something that, I think has now aligned with the kind of the purpose meaning.
It sounded like creating something that you continually worked on is something important to you, and in terms of how you live your life, it's not just like work as a separate pigeonhole, so to speak, where and that's a different part of your life. It's almost as if you're creating like a holistic approach to how you live, work, and recharge and relax, and in terms of creating those adventures and creating a lifestyle, in essence, that supports what you want to do throughout life, from what it sounds like.
Totally, and that has changed so much over the last 5 years, and I'm sure over the next 5 years it's going to change infinitely more times. But just being aware of where you are mentally, physically, emotionally, to be able to jump on those changes and be able to stay at those changes. I mean, I always look for basically look at what my dad was doing as well. So he changed jobs every, I don't know, sort of 7 to 10 years, which for his generation, sort of the baby boomers, that's almost unheard of. Like you either sit in one job for 40 years and you're happy with it, or I don't know, you sort of build your own business or something. So he chopped and changed, and he had a real entrepreneurial streak as well, which I think has come over to me as well. But yeah, it was really odd because I never really understood why he was making all these changes when I was a kid, and watched him go from being anything from a hairdresser to a bank manager to a just recently retired as a pasta maker or an egg noodle business. So that amongst many other jobs, he really was able to enjoy all of the rich tapestry of professional life. And I think I'm on that. I'm that, but on heat. So every 3 years or every few years, I'm really able to find what drives my purpose and what drives my energy, and be able to run with that. So there is a little bit of a direct line to where I want to go and what I want to do, but riding the bumps along the way, and finding the little river inlets to find what that end goal is.
Yeah, I think I love that analogy that you use of your dad's professional history, the rich tapestry. It almost sounds like that's the analogy by the way that you live your life. You're creating this almost like a patchwork quilt in essence, with all your different adventures that you go on, and different career paths, different experiences, and they all create your fabric of how you live your life. And just to go back to the Heysen there, you mentioned that there were mental periods of I think I was reading one of your journal entries, and you said that on day 3 was the hardest day of your life. I think you were going into Wilpena Pound Resort, and what made it the hardest day of your life?
It's a pretty elaborate statement, isn't it? So this has many different reasons. So not only was this my first solo hike, it was my first solo multi-day hike. I hadn't really experienced anything of this degree at all. I was suffering pretty bad loneliness for the first few days. Probably the big kicker, my water bladder in my bag broke. So I basically had this like bubbly full of like, I don't know, half dead jellyfish that I was trying to like try and keep the water in. So I had to put my hiking poles in my bag. And so I was basically dehydrated, lonely, sunburnt, tired, pretty much every mental, physical, and emotional issue that you could have. It felt like it was happening to me on that day. But I guess I'm the person that can always tries to find a positive out of everything. And I struggled on that day, but as the days went on, as the weeks went on, I found that every day was easier because that is the lowest I've ever been. So I know that if I can do that, I could pretty much do anything. And as far as resilience goes, that is just such a huge, I don't know what the right word is, such a huge barrier to be able to break through, that you know what your limits are, you know what your capabilities are to be able to do something. So I know if I can get through all of those things, I can do anything. So that really tumultuous 24 hours turned into a really powerful moment of my life.
Yeah, it's almost as if it was like the benchmark for your benchmark in the essence that of your lows that throughout the rest of the trip or the rest of the walk, that you would use that as inspiration to know that yes, you're experiencing hard times. Because I think when we caught up through a mutual friend's wedding, when we finally got up to his wedding, and there you were at the reception, sitting on a chair with your leg up, and your ankle was a little bit sore. So to have read that you were struggling on day 3 and then see you with a bung ankle, I'm thinking, oh, hang on, you managed to do quite well to finish up the trip.
Well, yeah, that bung ankle came on day 57 or 58. No, yeah, on day, I think it was day 57 of 59 of the overall trail. So the last 2 days were basically walking on a sprained ankle, which was not great. And what you saw at the wedding was me probably being too reckless on the dance floor and have just re-sprained it. So yeah, but I can only imagine what you would have seen when you walked in, because I had lost 6 kilograms worth of like fat and muscle and everything else, and the face was as disheveled as always. So you did very well to recognize me.
I remember I remember you saying your calorie expenditure had gone through the roof, that you could practically eat crap and it would just your metabolism was just on a red line, and you were just able to burn that off fairly quickly.
One of my favorite things about long distance adventure is the guiltless calories that you can eat. So you can basically just eat anything. I mean, particularly as a guy, like we've got really, really super high metabolisms. So the weight just drips off us typically. So yeah, just be able to chew through the food is definitely one of my highlights.
And speaking of long distance adventures, why did you choose long distance as opposed to I guess other forms of, some people shave their hair, dye a different color. Why long distance adventures?
Yeah, that's again a very good question. I think I'm really goal focused. Like that's something that really drives me. If I have a goal somewhere off in the distance, that like I will get there, whether I'm like half dead or whether I'm like lost all sense of reality, I will get there in the end. And yeah, I think being able to test myself in the first instance was something that really yeah, it was lots of curiosity about how I would go on those sorts of journeys. And now ever since then, I just have fallen in love with the whole concept, because one of the things, like we all go around our lives, this is my take on it anyway, we go around our lives with all of this different stuff going in our heads. Like we've got either a mortgage or kids or work or family issues or friend issues or whatever else. And these things are always rumbling around in our conscious. For me, it takes 10 days of solitude or walking or adventuring or whatever to be able to clear that palette and to be able to actually think as Josh, like what would I do now? What do I want to do now? Where is my life headed? So it's really hard to, I don't know, redirect our thinking when all of this other stuff is rumbling around in your head. So it's usually the first 10 days where the kind of, I guess, the slate is cleaned. And then usually like the last week, like, oh, I've got to go back to work. I've got to do this. I've got to like check this out. I've got to do my tax. I've got to like, I don't know, update my banking details, whatever. So it's always, to me, it's for me anyway. It's the only way where I know that my thinking is pure is that if I haven't got all this other noise around me.
It's almost as if like these long distance adventures, it's like you said, it takes you 10 days to sort of clear out what's happening in your mind to then actually, for want of a better word, you have like this Zen moment when you get into day 11 onwards, that you really are able to take in everything and anything around you on the trip and be more sensory and more aware of the present moment. And there must, like, how does that feel when you get to day 11, day 12?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Being present is what we all need to do in our lives. Like being present in everyday life is something we need to do, but it's so tough when we've got all these different things going on. So that's the first light that goes on for me. It's just being present, waking up, going, why is that crow, like it's 5 a.m? Why is that crow going bananas this hour? It's like, oh, that crow is really having a good time. Amazing. Like I wonder what that crow's up to. Like, so it's just really that kind of energy tweaks for me, or twinges in my head. Like, okay, I'm being like, I can now be fully immersed in everything that's going on externally and internally.
And in terms of, so you've done the you said that you've done the Heysen Trail. You've also done the Camino de Santiago over in Portugal. Is it Portugal / Spain, or just Spain?
Yeah, so there's like 100 different Caminos, but I did the one the movie's in, which goes from the border of France across northern Spain to Santiago, and then an extra 3 days out to Finisterre, which is out of the ocean. So it's funny, like the three really longest adventures I've done all end at the ocean. The Heysen Trail, the Murray, and Camino all finish at the ocean. So I'm not sure whether there's some like underlying thing that's going on there, but I found it's a really amazing way to finish a trail, is to just have this wide open expanse of ocean and thought and energy and feeling and emotion being pushed into this beautiful blue void. So I can recommend that highly.
It sounds like, yeah, the picturesque finish with nothing but the blue expanse of the ocean in front of you. It's almost like a metaphor for life. Like you've gone through the trials and tribulations, and there it is before you, is the beauty of what you've just done.
Oh, it's a total Hallmark card, but yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
And in terms, you mentioned before that you've done the Murray, the Murray paddle. So you've basically paddled the length of, or kayaked the length of the Murray from the top, from over in New South Wales all the way across to South Australia, and to the Murray Mouth.
Yeah. So there's a little bridge called Bringenbrong Bridge, where I guess it's the first place you can safely drop in a sea kayak. Before that, you kind of have to go whitewater rafting, and I barely knew how to paddle when I first got in. So I was like, okay, I should probably just skip that bit and do the rest of it.
Yeah. And with that, what did you find was the differences between the walk or the walks that you've done to doing a long distance adventure via kayak?
Yeah, I think I've always been a legs guy. So I've always liked running. I've always liked being active. Being on the water definitely didn't feel like home for the first little bit. Like I still really getting used to the bumps and the different aches from sitting down. Like I think maybe that's what it is. Like I'm so used to sitting down in my everyday life in front of a laptop, that like sitting down again for 2 months, I was like, what am I doing with myself? But obviously there was a whole lot of other good things going on. But yeah, there's different ventures coming up in the future, inevitably coming up in the future. I think most of them will probably be hiking, but I'll definitely be exploring more with maybe either bike packing or there's like, I can't remember what it's called. There's like boat packing or boat rafting or something where you can put a boat in a bag and then go through various places. So lots of different options there. But yeah, the main one that comes to mind is the physicality of it all. So when you're walking, you are using every single muscle in your body. Like you are whether your arms are using the poles and your back is carrying the bag and your legs are carrying you. you're definitely going to feel more exhausted at the end of the day. That's not to say I wasn't exhausted at the end of every day on the Murray, but it was I definitely looked a lot different physically when I finished the Murray. Like I had this kind of like Superman shoulder, but like I completely lost my bum. Like I had no bum at all. Whereas like on after these long distance hiking adventures, like my whole like this is all withered away. Like I've got absolutely no waist. My pants are falling down, but my calves are huge. My triceps are huge because of the hiking poles. So it's just it's physically I think is the for me was the biggest difference.
Yeah, so it sounds like if I were to do my first long distance adventure, I'd probably be better suited to jump on a kayak as opposed to walking from the sounds of it.
You've got the shoulders. I think you'll be fine.
The I think the last time I played tennis, I pinged both my calves. So I think if I'm going to walk out in the middle of outback at South Australia, I think that's probably not in my favor that I've got dodgy calves at the moment. Now, speaking of the next set of adventures, like what do you think is next in store? Like, is there? You said that you were goal focused. What would be on the top of your wish list of things that you would want to do?
Funnily enough, I've been thinking about this more and more over the last couple of weeks. So, how they're going to look and what and how they're going to come about is anyone's guess. But there's one trail that's I think it's probably about 7 or 8 years old that runs the length of New Zealand. So all the way North Island, South Island, which is about 3,000 kilometers, something like that, which also includes a bit of whitewater rafting, a bit of like you can go do a bit of cycling as well. So that one's really interesting. But I think I don't know how this is going to look, but I've always wanted to do a long distance hike in every Australian state. And if I can somehow package all of them up and do them at once, would be an absolute dream. So whether that's over the course of a year or however that looks, would just be ridiculously cool. And to be able to raise money through that, and yeah, being able to experience all these places over a short amount of time. Because I don't know. Also, in the back of my head, like we kind of need to get to see these places as soon as possible because we really don't know what climate change is going to do over the next however long, whether there's going to be fire, famine, or floods. Like something's going to happen. So being able to experience all these things over the course of 365 days might be kind of the solution. So whether that's might be a bit late for next year, but maybe the year after might be a shout.
Yeah. Oh, well, hopefully obviously the situations with pandemics and lockdowns that it's not going to be a thing of the future. We're hopefully we're past that point, and that allows you to be able to do the 365 days of adventuring. And
fingers crossed.
I'll definitely be following from a personal interest. I don't know. Have you ever read Tim Ferriss's book, The 4 Hour Work Week?
No.
So for me, I feel like that was one of the first books where I first gotten wind of like the digital nomad lifestyle. And Tim Ferriss was very known for creating systems that also create passive income, or those sorts of online digital entrepreneurship. And that's where the digital nomad for me had begun. So I'd recommend that book if you haven't read that before. It is a bit dated though, mind you, because I feel like you're probably more of an example of the way that you're currently living is more of an example of what that book was. Whereas when that book was written, it was quite new, it was quite novel. And but yeah, I would recommend that as something to read, just as like from a historical point for you to realize like actually I'm doing it.
Amazing. Well, those foundational sort of stories and ideas are so important to be able to make sure you go back to your core about what you're doing and why you're doing and how best to do it as well. So thanks for the tip.
Yeah, you're welcome. And just also because you mentioned that you are you do education pieces around mental health. What in terms of just from like from a broad swathe of people, like what's like a really practical example of promoting mental health, you said before, getting in touch with nature and doing activity. Are there any other things on top of those at all?
Yeah, so I think um, while I'm doing the adventures, as you know, like there's lots of videos that then stay online over a long period of time, which also incorporate all these messages. But yeah, just this kind of week, these last couple of weeks, I've been doing lots of presentations. So there was a school presentation up in Elizabeth, in what was it, like 40 minutes up the road. And I think it's next week or the week after, doing a Rotary presentation. But I've also done Scouts presentations and different workplace presentations as well. So and that can be anything from what it's like to be a long distance adventurer, or discussing the geology of the regions. And mental health is there's always an underlying aspect about mental health and the challenges that I faced while I was on the trail and then coming back off the trail as well. So yeah, it's kind of a big melting pot of different discussion topics, but something I really enjoy doing.
Yeah, I mean, as a fellow introvert as well, you doing these presentations as well is stepping out of your comfort zone, but also it feels like you're leading into like a growth, something that actually expands who you are, and allows you to explore different areas of what life brings for you. So being able to do those presentations, massive kudos for you being able to do that and spreading your stories and telling and sharing your stories of overcoming a lot of adversities on your long distance adventures as well. Now, Josh, I could talk to you for like hours, and we could probably catch up over a beer or two, be able to catch up with your adventures. But as we're about to wrap up, is there, in case anybody wants to keep up to date with your new adventure, whether that be bike, what was it, bike hiking or boat?
Yeah.
Boat packing?
I'm not sure what it's called. I can't remember what it's called. But let's run with boat packing. Yeah, whatever that looks like. It'll always be displayed in some way, shape, or form on the Trekking West platform. So last name's West, Trekking West. I love a good pun, so that's where I went with that one. So yeah, Trekking West on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, and I don't know, I think there's something else. Pinterest, I think, has a few different things. But yeah, looking to expand that. Taking your lead, I would love to do kind of a podcast kind of a thing moving forward as well. So yeah, it'll be advertised in some way. And if you're looking to, I guess, engage with more of the day-to-day content of the trail, or of all the adventures really, then trekkingwest.com is where you can find all of the crazy adventures.
Cool. Well, trekkingwest.com, I'll link that into the show notes. And just as a wrapping final comment, I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time to be a guest on the show and share your experiences going through your long distance adventures. I think I referred to you as the Nedd Brockman on water. I mean, you've gone from one end of Australia to another, in essence, along the Murray, and being able to raise as much funds as you have over the period of time that you have is fantastic. I mean, $20,000 is no small sum, and that goes towards the communities or the regions that you feel as needing the most support, particularly regional Australia. So well done to you, and I look forward to keeping up to date with your latest adventures. So thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much, and I want to give you a quick pat on the back as well, mate. I've loved watching these interviews that come out every week or so. So keep up the great work.
Appreciate it. Well, until next time, mate. We'll see you then.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks. And there you have it, episode 5 with Josh West of Trekking West. Having completed smaller scale adventures such as Trek West, Peak East, there's no pun intended there, when compared to Josh's accomplishments, I was in awe of what he was able to achieve. Considering that Trek West, Peak East took us 30 kilometers to travel from West Beach to the top of Mount Lofty, Josh was able to do this, when I say this, 30 kilometers, day in, day out, for 59 days throughout his journey along the Heysen Trail. And no doubt being able to back up day in, day out would have taken a lot of mental strength in order to do it, as well as a lot of resilience to get through the hard days. As he said on day 3, that was one of his most difficult days that he's ever faced. But throughout the journey, I think what really stood out for me is that you could really see that Josh embodied fortitude and resilience throughout his journeys, and the fact that he also used it as a platform to raise funds for the Black Dog Institute because of the need for mental health services in regional South Australia really shows that the actions that Josh took and has taken and continues to take is completely in alignment with his values as a person, and he's living his life in congruence with what he wants to be and sets his life up in such a manner, which is very admirable. And I'm just very fortunate that he was able to come on board and be a guest on the show. So I hope you really enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, give a like on the post, drop a comment, and share this far and wide. I just want to say thank you very much for watching. We're about to go into the Christmas break, and just in case if I don't catch you, I hope you have a great Christmas and New Year, and here's to a very fortunate and gratitude-filled 2023.